Hi, everyone. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Kendra Grindle, and this is the chart webinar. So chart, you're going to hear throughout. It's an acronym that stands for Connectivity Headquarters for Analysis, Research, and Transparency. But for short, throughout today, we're going to call it chart. So again, I'm Kendra Grindle. I'm the Director for Community Strategy at the Maine Connectivity Authority, or MCA. I am joined today by our wonderful speakers. So Ethan is our research and data manager at the Maine Connectivity Authority. We have Simon Thorne from Fidium and Peter Baldwin joining us from Caribou Public Library as we kind of go farther along in this conversation. They'll be able to provide a little bit more context to who they are, what they do, and why they're joining us here today. I am just really excited to have this conversation. The chat is available if you have questions throughout. We will have Q&A a little bit later on after we go through what chart looks like, data sources, the limitations, and a demo. Each of our speakers uses chart in various ways. And we are also excited to kind of hear how you've already experienced chart on our website, how and where you look to come to our website for data and for mapping, and anything that you feel like is missing or would be great to see in a map or in a data and analysis form. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ethan to get us started with what exactly is chart. It will give us a little bit more understanding of how it came to be and the opportunities and limitations of the platform.
Thank you, Kendra Joe. Um, so as Kendra Joe mentioned, so much of what we do in the Maine Connectivity Authority, and especially in the spatial data and mapping department, which is, the world of chart, is a lot of location-based data. And when MCA first started all of our work years ago, might be surprising how limited some of the resources that were available. There was census data, data provided by the FCC, but how that was really presented to the public, that really was up to, MCA's own discretion. And so, if you've ever explored the MCA website, things were first kind of presented by either in terms of infrastructure or upcoming programs or um, different infrastructure projects, digital equity, we have things like that. But all of our kind of our data was presented in this, it was all on our website, but a little spread out. And so chart really brings everything together into one more manageable and holistic location in a better way to help, work with and communicate to the public, different private sectors, Maine state government to have, more share our reliable data in just a more efficient manner. Um, so let's see. What chart really wanted to it really wanted to be a framework for our entire operation, all of our tools that we wanted to provide to, again, public legislators, ISPs. There's a lot of different questions that come our way, different problems that we're working on. And Chart is a place where hopefully all of these answers can be found. Um, this is Our data is always changing. Everything changes at a different rate. Some things are more regular. The FCC updates certain data and maps every 6 months. Some of these programs that we were working with, it really is just day-to-day changes. So there's always something to look forward to. Let's see. I think we can move on. Yes, thank you. So like I mentioned earlier, some of our data comes from the FCC. There's a national broadband map. Um, the US Census, and data that we update ourselves working with primarily ISPs for, as projects are moving along. We finalize individual locations that are being connected. We have a large amount of data, lot of maps that some of these, are more interactive. We can look at with different tools, different ways to analyze and assess this data. Unfortunately, nothing there's not one map that really just shows everything that everyone is looking for at the same time. We are working for always updating and enhancing our maps, making everything more simpler to utilize. It's a daily struggle, but it's improving every day. I think now would be a good time. I can share my own screen and we can.
Yeah, I think diving into a demo to understand a little bit of how this works in real time and how we are able to approach the use of chart from different experiences. And then after the demo, we'll dig in a little bit into what does it look like from an ISP perspective or a library's perspective. I know that I use chart to when I'm in community meetings and direct a lot of folks to it. Having everything in place is really helpful. So thanks, Ethan.
Great. So from our main connectivity website, um, the chart portal, if you are just you're an average user, an average citizen logging in, this is what you'll be brought to. Quick explanation of chart. And as you go down, we will begin, of course, some numbers, some data. And we tried to break this down into what different, kind of our different headers, what people may be looking for, as in service availability, more detailed infrastructure awards, what is actually connecting all of our infrastructure, some of the more specific programs that we are currently working on, and then additional resources. So we found that a lot of, common questions, if we have someone that is reaching out, usually someone will reach out to Kendra Joe, just a resident somewhere in Maine. Um, Usually it is something about they are lacking in their connectivity. Something is going on. They're wondering why they aren't getting, the service that they would like to see. So, very commonly they want to maybe look at their service. So we've brought this down to either the township level, counties, senate districts, and house districts. So a lot of people, they might want to be interested in, more localized. So where, in their township, what they want to see. So if you click on that, you'll be brought to this data where you can then see, you can look for your town. Let's say you lived at 180 Street in Brunswick. Be able to find your area where you live, and you can see that Brunswick, um, you know, over 86% of all of the residents in Brunswick have a high served connectivity connection. And there are only 6 houses that are still left that have technically no connection. So if you were a resident of Brunswick, you would probably know if you were one of those 6. So maybe this isn't, exactly giving you the answers you want, but it does give you more information. Saying, okay, like Brunswick has a very high rate of connectivity. Um, and so maybe you want a more detailed analysis of your own location. As I kind of was talking alluded to earlier, some of this data that we've collected and that we are using for our own analysis, it is either licensed, there is more private, there is some confidentiality that has to do with this. So most of the time, a lot of the data that we have, we're not allowed to really publicly share any more specific than a like census block level. So we are able to show some more data if we average out certain areas. So back from this page, if we were to look at this service availability map that we have, we're able to take averages of these areas. So if we wanted to bring back into kind of the same area of Brunswick, um, we would still see that, you know, a little more there. You can see that some of these, the average of Brunswick might still be considered underserved. So that's giving you a little more data that there is still some work to be done in your area. Um, and if you are a real active resident and you thought that there was something that you would want to, talk to your local legislator about, you can go to one of these Senate districts or House district maps. Um, you would be able to find your legislative district. Then you find, okay, I'm in the 100th House district. Um, I can contact my local representatives, see what they can do about my connectivity, and maybe start a great conversation with your own legislator, which, maybe they themselves are going to log into the chart website. They want to know, okay, I thought that there were some projects that we were already working on here. So maybe we want to see some of these infrastructure projects that are going on. So these maps bring to, we can see all of the projects working across the state. Want to stay in the Brunswick area and say, okay, it looks like maybe this project. What is this? Okay, it looks like very recently Comcast was awarded a large grant to increase do some work. So maybe I can reach out to Comcast, see how that project is going along, make sure my house, my business was part of this. Um, these 216 connections, hopefully, you were included in that. Um, Continuing on what we have available. Um, a very large federal program, the BEAD program, is something that we've been working a lot on. And so we have these maps available to see how that's progressing. The BEAD eligible locations, these are all of the locations across the state that would be included in this federal program to increase connectivity. If you wanted to just continue with the example of Brunswick, zoom in and say, okay, maybe not as many in Brunswick, but there still are some, projects available, some work being done. But if you were in this general Main Street area of Brunswick, okay, maybe that is not going to be affecting me that much. Another one of our big programs was the WIA program, the Working Internet ASAP program, which helped get people who had fewer options for connectivity, help them get set up with Starlink, so low Earth orbit satellite. So that program, you can see these are all of the areas across the state that really had no other options. Just wasn't going to be able to connect them in a reasonable timeline. So again, sticking with Brunswick, you can see, okay, a few areas there are still some locations that even in a major city like Brunswick, still Starlink would be the best option. But again, you're saying for some reason, still not a lot in the Main Street area. So if there's anything else, maybe you can see community anchor institutions. And here now you see a lot more. There are some options for different resources to help people who need some connection, if they maybe not at their actual residence or business, but there are things in their neighborhoods that could help them. And to get more specific into those are additional resources. The Tech Help for Me program is a new resource that we have to explore all of the um, different what is available across the state to help people with connectivity in their local area. So in Brunswick, you can see we have the memorial libraries, we have their website, contact information, and what kind of tech access is available. Digital Navigator program, classes, what public Wi-Fi, of course. Um, so yeah, that's just a pretty quick explanation of what Chart hopes to do. There's obviously a lot more here. It does, depending on who you are, that was just one example of if you were a local resident. But we try to really make this, we work a lot with also um, like ISPs, different providers who might be looking for a little more detailed analysis. And so we have different logins for ISPs, which we would then work with to, they would also have access to some of that uh, licensed data. And so we can get a little more technical in a private and secure way to share. Um, yeah, I think can leave it there for now, but happy to take questions moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. And so on a couple of those on the side panel, it kind of tells you when it was last updated. Can you remind us kind of how, with what frequency the data is updated or maybe where the data sourcing is coming from that would cause that update?
Yeah, it really depends on what we're looking at. So a lot of the main source of our data is from the FCC. So that would be every 6 months, we get a very large, statewide update. We do some internal processing to kind of give us some more data with that. Um, so we are looking at, I mean, by December should have another update, which is nice. Census data, which, we get the big updates every 10 years. So
Mhm.
something, a little more long term to look forward to. Um, when we have any individual programs or projects that we are working on that, we have our first set of data of just kind of what is the larger plan to how many, locations we are going to try and connect. And then as the project in its construction phase, something we get more data like on the ground data. We've realized that there's actually like a building that we were looking at is abandoned or there was some accident, it's burned down. There was actually never a building there. It was just a satellite picking up a
Mhm.
shadow or a big rock. That does happen. So we'll update that. That's really, day by day kind of updating. And then using some commercial data from like either Ookla, there's cost quest data. So that is, kind of case by case scenario.
That's great. And that kind of leads me to Simon. So as a internet service provider and someone who has very much in the know around our programs and utilizing the data that we put out to request funding and to work with reporting. What has your experience been with our chart tools and mapping, especially through like our most recent BEAD program, for instance?
A good question. So I appreciate the opportunity to join Simon Thorne with Fidium Fiber. And I was one of the folks who was working on the main BEAD application. And as such, I think the tool was really extremely useful. One of the things that I really appreciated was the willingness on the Maine Connectivity Authority's part to help navigate different things. For example, in our applications, there were certain locations within a project area that we knew to be off-grid or no access, right? No pole line, no conduit. And so we, throughout the state, accumulated quite a list. And on the first iteration, that list needed to be inputted manually, meaning one location at a time. In the second iteration of BEAD, we were able to request that a bulk submission form be submitted. And so that was extremely helpful, right? It was extremely helpful. And I find that the tools were very easy to use. Um,
Yeah, and my assumption is that you do this with other states as well through, through the BEAD program was a national program. Um, do you feel like the approach to a platform and having an opportunity to see it in this lens is on par with what you're seeing elsewhere? Are there still areas where it can prove difficult?
Yeah, I think that I live in Maine, so I'm probably biased, but I think I think Maine and the Maine Connectivity Authority have done an excellent job with your platform. I've submitted grants in a few other states. Um, it can be somewhat convoluted in the way that they've put their mapping together, right? It made sense for their state, but maybe not as much sense for the end user who's
Mhm.
applying. So I appreciated the amount of PSAs, project service areas. I think that's what we were calling them. Um, and the way that they grouped together specific locations, whereas other states actually went so far as to do it by the county, which made it, somewhat problematic in some instances, right? So I think Maine has done a very good job of how they laid that out and grouped them together in a way that tried to make the most sense, right? Sometimes you had one straggler over here you had to lump in, right? But I think it worked really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Peter, from where you sit at the Caribou Library, what does it look like for you to need to use resources that we may provide, whether it's mapping or tech help for me, for instance, both for the library itself and for the constituents that use the library?
So, as Simon mentioned, quite a bit of the resources that the MCA has been offering lately have been very useful to us when we talk about applying for grants. The mapping and having all of that data readily available for us really helps to show underserved populations that we are local to, as well as some actual hard numbers that we can point to when it comes to grant funding for connectivity infrastructure and other programming like that, as well as the tech help for me, which is a huge resource for us. Since we're located in rural Maine, like we have a lot of need up here for not only getting people connected to the internet, but getting people uh, access to education on how
Mhm.
to get connected, on what it means to be connected, and what things are available to you. So, using tech help for me, we have a lot of resources that show us, well, this is where you can get access to public Wi-Fi if you are somebody who just moved here and needs to work remote, but they haven't installed internet in your home just yet. If you are older and you would like some tech assistance programs, perhaps just a visit with a digital navigator, this is somebody who might be closer to your area, a library you can go to where they might offer these kinds of programs. Having all of that consolidated information at our fingertips has been incredibly helpful. And it's one of the big resources that we point a lot of our patrons to as well.
Yeah. Have you gotten any feedback or just reception when you are pointing patrons to those resources?
Yes, actually. We've had a lot of our patrons be a bit grateful for it lately because we've been working with another organization who's been putting on digital literacy courses. And due to funding issues and all of that stuff lately, they're in need and in search of new places for digital literacy education. And they found it to be quite useful for, well, this is actually right by my house. I didn't know that this place offered that. Oh, I'm traveling and my mother lives in that area down there. And she's been asking me and now I know where to give it to her. We've had quite a lot of really great feedback about it.
That's fantastic. And for those who don't know, we were able to launch the Tech Help for Me platform earlier this year, and still working to get as much into that database as we can, while also having it be used in real time by folks, and it's accessible both on a computer but also on mobile devices as well, which I think can be really helpful for folks like you were talking about, Peter, who are traveling and on the go. They're not going to whip out their laptop. They might be looking for something on their phone instead. And so when we were pulling this together, libraries and our regional Wabanaki broadband partners, and really just anyone in the larger digital opportunity space in Maine, were really helpful to putting a lot of that data in, because you all know where some of those locations and resources are at your more localized area than we would. Wondering, as you look at the Tech Help for Me platform, are there any requests that you get or questions that you get from patrons that, we could potentially be able to adapt it for?
It's a little bit of a gray area, mostly because when we talk about tech help for me, and so much of that is people who are in need of a certain kind of education or a certain thing, which also precludes the not entirely sure what they are asking for yet. I think most of what the patrons are looking for is not necessarily the product of Tech Help for ME, which is just they're looking for expanded digital literacy education and expanded programming and availability of these, which Tech Help for ME would just be expanded by other places having those. So not necessarily, but I guess an improvement that will be coming eventually when more places offer more opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Ethan, I'm curious from, your side of things, what does it look like to have external partner input, data inputs? As we look at something like Tech Help for Me, having partners that are more local to their regions provide inputs on, where are those public Wi-Fi spots, where are the resources and data. Do you have any insights or tips for folks as they, find areas where maybe a resource is missing, or needs a correction?
Always appreciated. I always love more input. As Peter mentioned, I think the idea of just like almost like not knowing exactly what you're looking for, that's kind of our biggest challenge. Because like like you want something, you're looking for something, but like what is actually how to look for it, this is something that people aren't really quite familiar with, versus you're thinking of like just in general, like, oh, where is like a library? I want some like a book, you're looking for libraries or bookstores. But like when it comes to some sort of broadband connection, there are so many different places you can really go to. So you're not, it really depends on what, the residents are looking for, what an ISP is trying to do. So really just like more communication all the time. It's great, love a lot of this. It really is also, possible, it's, these resources that we have, they're made to be updated and changed. These are not supposed to stay the same for years on end. Um, and like we mentioned before, multiple times a year at the very least, everything will be changing. So happy to always take more input and just keeping conversations open.
Yeah. I mean, I can say as someone that's been in this space for a while, any map is more maps than we used to have in the broadband space, and data was always a pinch point for not only Maine, but every state that was trying to understand what connectivity looked like. And I know, Simon, you've seen this as well, and your colleagues evolve over the last better part of a decade. It really was census block data, like Ethan mentioned in the beginning, and then community data. And I think Tech Help for Me showcases some of that as well, of what community data can look like now, less in terms of where connectivity is or isn't, but where those digital skills offerings and public service offerings look like across the state. As we look at the different layers that are provided through the chart platform, Simon, I'm wondering, we talked a little bit about what it looked like to apply for funding utilizing the maps, but you're also going out into communities and talking with legislators. Do you utilize these maps and this platform when you're having those conversations in terms of where connectivity is or isn't, and where your company in particular is showing up in those conversations?
Yes, absolutely, Kendra Joe. I typically when I meet with a community, I'm showing my own map, meaning where we will build to,
Mhm.
right? Where are the locations that we're awarded and what will our network build look like at a high level? And the question from the community, or actually from whomever I'm meeting with, is always, can I have a copy of that map? And unfortunately, the answer is always no, right? Sorry, it's proprietary, and so we can't share that. And so the chart
Come
resource,
on.
yeah, the chart resource is extremely helpful because you can point the community to that resource and I'll take them to the beat award specific map and say, look, this is going to get you relatively close, right? I mean, as Ethan pointed out earlier, there are some restrictions on what can be provided. And I think, from a community perspective, that's probably a little frustrating, but it's complicated, right? It's very complicated. But at least you provide them with the tool so they can, bring that back to the community, right? Because typically it's a broadband committee or maybe a town manager that I'm meeting with or a representative, right? And so they can bring that back to the community and they have something tangible that they can show the community, right? Because you can go to different maps and see different things, right? You could go to the project service area tab and you'd see the project area that's in your community, right? And if you wanted to get more granular, you could go to the bead location map and actually see all of the locations that were in there. So yeah, I find it very valuable, right? Communities want to know, and a picture is really worth 1,000 words. So
Yeah, that's a great point. And where it also, I think, presents a little bit of an opportunity and a limitation, right? So on the flip side of that, I might go into community, or Ethan might be talking with a community member that I direct to him. And the question is, great, but when, what's the timeline for new connections, or where we know about private builds that are happening because we see Fidium trucks out in our neighborhood, but that's not showing up here. And so Ethan, I think this gets a little bit back to what we were talking about of, our data is only as good as the data that we get. And so the data coming in through the FCC, from our internet service provider partners, which is inclusive not only of where we fund, but also where those private investments and builds are taking place across the state. And we know that especially in the last 18 months and looking forward to the next, it's a lot of activity happening in this space. I want just to make sure that, so as we've kind of gone through this, oh, thank you. The links to chart and tech help for me are in the chat. All of this lives on our website. And the other thing I really like about chart is that it pulls, we were able to kind of hear from partners and community members that we had lots of maps across our website, but they weren't in one place that was easy to find. And so chart really brings everything under one umbrella. I'm wondering, Ethan, from that perspective, what does the next steps of chart kind of look like for MCA as we both move through funding programs and evolution of tools like Tech Help for Me? Are there things that are kind of in the um, coming online in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yes, definitely. Some of these older programs are coming to, completion. So, we're going to have where it's it's exciting to say, final data for some of these programs, which is very exciting. So that's going to be, the most definitive, verified on the ground data. So we really know, I know I did just say that the everything is going always updates, but some of these actually like will be, definitive final connectivity maps, which is very exciting. But then as those, programs do close out, then all of these, the original service availability maps will be updated, one more time all at once. So, your township, your county, your House or Senate district, will be updated as well. Um, the BEAD program, as that, continues, those will be updated more and more frequently, and seeing how that uh, really brings together, a large federal program. Looking further ahead, once all of the, these are some of the locations that we're working on now. These are, between BEAD and the WIA program, we're looking for, that's, the broadband locations, everything else that is left over, moving on to wireless cellular connectivity. That's going to be something that's going to be showing up. So people who use their cell phones and they, find their road or even just, one part of their property has some sort of wireless dead zone. That is something that we're working on in the next 6 months. So those will be some updates that you'll be able to see. And that's something we're getting a lot of public input from. So if people want to share, where they see problems in their own community, that will be available for them. So hopefully we're going to get a lot of public input from that, and which, hopefully will then drive more, um, you know, ISP input and hopefully some possibly like political changes, people that are going to get just more interested. They want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, I love that. And um, one of and you can point us there if it exists, but do we have a map that shows the kind of the density or different variations of technology across the state? So where there might still be DSL versus cable versus fiber expansion, and then getting into those alternative technologies that you mentioned of wireless and satellite and cellular.
Um, Unfortunately, not exactly that simple, just because
Yeah.
of
What do you mean it's not that simple?
licensing.
Come on.
Would love to, just because of some of the uh, license data, and not supposed to show some of that at such a discrete level.
Mm.
No.
Yeah, so the case in point, someone who's not in data and licensing, thinking that it would be so simple to just make a map like that. And there definitely are limitations. What should people know if they're looking for their address? And we get into a little bit of this with the FCC map, broadband map itself, which also backfills into our map. Um, if they don't see their location, is there something that they can do? They contact us. Is there anything that they can do to make sure that their locations are visible and present on our map for future funding considerations?
Um, we can support individuals who have that problem. There is a process. Um, it's a great idea for us to, make more visible. Usually that does go through the FCC. You kind of challenge your own location. You are able to do that for yourself. A private resident is able to do that. A business owner can do that for their location. We are also able to do that if we find that there's something that, we know we are working with an ISP on a project and they're saying we are connecting to this location, but for whatever reason, it's not on our map. As we go through that, we will make note of that and we will file a challenge with the FCC to make sure, in their next update, that location does get added to the larger broadband map.
Great. It's good to hear that, like the boat hasn't completely sailed on the locations. And I know folks are not only concerned about houses that have obviously been there for a while that may have not been seen because of tree cover for whatever reason, but just new builds also throughout the state of Maine, because we know there's a lot of new builds happening. Peter, when we're thinking about our partners like libraries and connectivity hubs throughout the region, is there a way in which we can, present this information and these tools that would be most helpful? I think the biggest thing is librarians are not going to be the broadband connectivity mapping experts, but they are usually the first place someone goes with a question if they need one or if they have one. I'm wondering when you're thinking about your colleagues in the library space, what does it look like to bring new tools and new resources to them, and any kind of tips or things that we should consider as we develop more opportunities to engage with them?
Well, libraries love having new tools and resources that we can share. As you're right, because it's one of our favorite things to do, to help people and to get all of that information in one place that could possibly be a benefit to our community. I think one of the most influential things when we talk about getting libraries to use new resources is showing use cases. How beneficial it's been for other libraries, even a webinar like this where you just sort of talk about it and offer that up to the community, getting them to see and understand, put it in their mind that this is something that could be useful. I know for a lot of librarians in my area, something like this is incredibly useful. Most of us serve aging communities with limited connectivity. So something like a lot of what we've discussed, whether it's the actual data side or whether it's the tech help for ME, it's important to either know those numbers or to be able to point people in the right direction for potential resources. For me, I think what's been most useful in becoming a proponent is seeing how useful it's been for my patrons in my community. So I imagine for other libraries, it would be the same, learning that it is useful and how it is useful, and then going from there.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I know it can be challenging to kind of bridge that gap from a just a communication standpoint of like, here's all of the data and all of the ways in which it can be viewed and seen and understood, and trying to get that into messaging and just a vocabulary that is very much translatable to anyone that's coming into a library as a patron, which can range in education level, age level, interest, experience, even with technology. And when you're looking at a platform like Tech Help for Me, it's they might be just looking for some of the most basic services that a lot of folks already have access to or take for granted. I know we've had a couple of questions, and Ethan, I appreciate you jumping in and answering some of them in real time. But why did you choose to create maps that do not overlap with each other? And this is a big one for me in the community space of like, when you have layer over layer over layer, it can just get so bogged down in terms of information. And there are a few, and I don't know if you want to pull up maybe the map that lived on our homepage. It's a heat map that you can also overlay with where we've funded with our programming. And I believe that can be overlaid on a couple of the maps, but it's helpful to kind of see both that density and connectivity with, where have investments been made. So yeah, I don't know if you want to pull it up and kind of show what it looks like when there are a couple of layers on a map at the same time.
Sure. Yeah, I can pull some of those up. But yeah, like you said, it really, it would be great to have everything just in one place, one map to look at. just it's just the limitations of, the technology, the mapping programs that we use, like it really is, we're trying our best, that really is what it comes down to. And have gone through a lot of different iterations of these maps. So like this one, I think this is what you were
Yeah.
mentioning. This
Yep.
is what was on our homepage for a long time. So in the background, you see the red, green, blue, kind of to show the general service areas, what the connectivity is like across the state. Obviously, the North Woods, it's going to be pretty empty. There's just no one really living there. And obviously, southern Maine along the coast, you're going to see a lot of that, the green high connectivity. Um, and then overlaid with our infrastructure projects and programs that we have going on. But just for some people, especially that haven't really used these type of maps before, uh, it might be hard to, you click on one, you don't realize that you can kind of sometimes scroll through different, to get to the layers underneath. So we do try and split them up, kind of piece by piece. Some people don't like having multiple tabs open, but it really does help be really clear, focus on one thing at a time. We found that it is a little easier for people to work with. I believe this is the other. Also, just the programming that we use. Sometimes, these takes a little while to load. We have found, that is it is a lot of data that we are working with. And so you will see sometimes that is something that will be an issue. See, it does take a little bit. And that's something that we're always trying to work with. We're always trying to improve our data, simplify things, and increase, the accessibility, because someone that is not used to that, they might have just seen what we just saw and think, oh, there's no data, or their map is broken, the link isn't working. And so that's what we're trying to avoid.
Mm.
So when you have all of the data in one location on one map, this is a lot that it's going to slow things down. So that's the idea. We're always working on improving that, in the by like early next year, we're working on the next version of our front page map, and just, always trying to improve those things.
Thank you. And it's always I always appreciate seeing when a map or a website takes a little bit of time to upload on someone's screen, just because that is that's the case for a lot of Maine residents across the state who are struggling with connectivity. It's not helpful if we create something that's so bogged down that they can't open it to get the information that they're looking for. I do want to answer the question that's in the Q&A, and then we'll kind of move to close. But just as a reminder, the Maine Connectivity Authority is the state agency that's charged with expanding connectivity across the state and digital opportunity. We are the previous authority, the Connect Maine Authority, has been integrated fully into MCA, and so in terms of the data and tools and resources from a connectivity, broadband, and digital opportunity standpoint, we are the leading state agency on that work. There are federal maps, as Ethan mentioned, the FCC National Broadband Map, and service availability maps that folks can use. Some partners, nonprofits, and research institutions across the nation also utilize that data to build out various maps and tools within their approach and research. But for the state of Maine, MCA is that leading agency. And so if you're interested or curious about connectivity in your region, whether that's internet connectivity, or as we continue to move forward to understanding cellular and wireless connectivity across the state, we would definitely be that first stop shop for folks. So if you want to email us at info@mainconnectivity.org, it's a great place to start. And between our team members like Ethan and Megan Grable, Jenna Ingram, and myself will try to get you the answer that you're looking for. I want to thank everyone, Peter, Simon, Ethan, for being on today, as well as those that were able to join us to learn a little bit more about Chart and our tools and how you can utilize them. It's been a great opportunity to dig in a little bit on what that use looks like, both from partners' perspective, whether it's public like the libraries or private like an internet service provider. We really want to make sure that the tools and resources we're putting out there are usable, and getting folks the answers that they're looking for within the abilities and limitations that we have. So if there is a tool or a map that you're looking for that you're not seeing, or even a change to a map that you've been looking at that would help with the usability, share that with us. Again, info@mainconnectivity.org. And hopefully we can make a change, or at least work with you to understand, what we're able to provide or where else you could be looking for it. It's been great to see how adaptive some of these maps can be to really meet the needs and the skill level of folks that are using them. We want to make sure that there's no barriers in place for that. So again, Simon, Peter, Ethan, thank you so much. And thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.